Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Are there any questions from last time? Questions from last class? Okay, if not, so we were talking about. Yeah, go. Oh, yes, thank you. Uh, yeah, good morning. Good morning again. So I was asking you if there was any question before we start today. Okay, if not, so last time I was talking about a state space representation. So many of you, I think many of you know about computing transfer functions from block diagrams. So I want to spend a little time talking about the state space representation, and that's what I began last time. So the goal here is to think about every delay element as a state, and then the state is being updated. That means the output of every delay element is considered a state. So that means the input of the delay element is the next state. So if the current state is x1 and x2 at time n, so this will be the state x1 at time n plus 1, that's the next state, and that's what we are computing here. So let me start with this example. Okay, so let me start with the FIR filter example. 3-tap FIR filter. So when I say 3-tap or second order, they are all same thing. Two states means order is 2, and 3-tap means 3 coefficients. So if I think of this as state x1 at time n, and the output of this flip-flop is state x2 at time n, then the next state, so this is going to be next state for x1, so x1 n plus 1 delayed leads to x1 n, x2 n plus 1, so that means the input here should be the next state for x2, so that's x2 n plus 1, and then the output y. So I can write the next state vector x1 n plus 1, x2 n plus 1 is equal to the transition matrix A times the state vector x1, x2 plus some column vector times input xn. Okay, so x2 n plus 1 is exactly same as x1 n, so I can put that as 1 0, and the next state x1 n plus 1 is same as the input xn, so this is 0 0 1 and that's 0. So this is in the form of the state vector x at time n plus 1 is the transition matrix A times the state vector at time n plus some b times usually I could write this input as u, which probably I should do that. I mean, I think u is usually unit step, but that's not here. Anyway, let's continue with xn, and it does at least I'm not using x, and these are x1, x2. So the output y, which is C transpose. So if we call these inputs h0, h1, h2, these weights, not input, sorry, h0, h1, h2. So this is h1, h2 times x1 and x2n plus, so this is C transpose times the state vector plus d, this is d, which is here h0 times xn. Okay, so that's a d. So we now have a state space representation x vector n plus 1. So this can be a n dimensional vector, column vector of dimension n, and A will be n times n, and this will be n times 1. This will be scalar quantity in this case, and C transpose is 1 times n and n times 1, and this is scalar and this is scalar. Okay. Okay, so so this is the state space representation of the FIR filter. What I want to do is to compute. So from the here I can simply observe that the h of z, the transfer function, is simply h0 plus h1 z to power minus 1 plus h2 z to power minus 2. So for the 3-tap filter, that's the transfer function. And but I want to compute the transfer function using these state space representation parameters, namely the vectors a, b, c, and d. So how can I compute h in terms of a, b, c, and d? Okay, so so the state space state vector update equation is xn plus 1 is equal to a xn plus b un. If I take the z transform of that, so we have z x of z is equal to a x of z plus b, okay, this u, okay, okay, xn, b x of z. Let's see here. Now I got to get into the problem. Okay. All right. So now I can see that so let's put back this as u, input u. Okay. So if I take this input as u, not to be confused with the states, and this is input u, input u, input u. Okay. So a xn plus b un, c transpose xn plus d un. Okay. So so b u of z, the input u. Okay, u is the input. And then if I bring this term to the left side, okay, who can tell me how to correctly write this? This is a wrong way of writing. What's the correct way of writing this? This is a n by n matrix, so this should be z times the identity matrix, which is also dimension n. So that's a n by n identity matrix, which would be 1, 1 up to all diagonals are 1. So that's the correct way to write this. Z minus a is a wrong way to write this because this is a matrix of dimension n by n, and I can't write just a scalar quantity minus a matrix. Okay, so then xz is equal to zi minus a inverse times b times uz. From the output equation yn is equal to c transpose xn plus d un, and again if you take the z transform, yz is equal to c transpose xz, which is this whole thing here. I substitute zi minus a inverse times b uz plus d uz. So I can write this as plus d all times uz. So I've skipped a couple of steps, not too many, but just so this substitute this xz here and then take the uz outside, and then the transfer function h, which is what I'm interested in, is equal to y by u, and that is c transpose times zi minus a inverse b plus d. So now in fact I should be able to use this definition of a, b, c, and d here in that expression to be able to prove that the transfer function is simply this thing. So what is so obvious looking at it will take some time, but this is really a formal way of doing it, and you let the computer run, and you can compute whatever you want to compute from the state space representation. So Okay, so for the same FIR example, if I take the A, B, C, D matrix, so for this example, A was 0, 0, 1, 0, B is 1, 0, C transpose is H1, H2, and D is H0. So these are things that we had seen here from that page. So I grab A, B, C transpose and D and substitute in that equation here. So by the way, before I start, if we have a matrix 2 by 2 matrix A, B, C, D inverse, what is the inverse of a 2 by 2 matrix? I mean, these are kinds of things that it's good to know quickly. So that's 1 over the determinant, which is A D minus B C, times the adjoint transpose. So you take this first adjoint, that's a D, and then take the adjoint here. So that would be C minus C, and then you take the transpose of that. So that minus C here comes here, and minus B and A. So that's the inverse of a 2 by 2 matrix. Okay. Okay, so now if you want to quickly check that indeed this times that is equal to identity, so if you take the A, B, C, D times D minus B minus C A, and the first row, first column is A D minus B C divided by that. So 1 by determinant, this quantity is the determinant delta, and second column, first row, second column minus AB plus AB 0, second row, first column 0, and then AD minus BC by this is 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. So which is what we would expect. Okay. So now I can say Z times I minus A is equal to Z minus 0. Okay, this is Z minus 0, 0, 1, 0, which is equal to Z0 minus 1 Z, and the inverse of that, the determinant is Z squared, so that's 1 over the determinant, and if I just grab this quickly, Z, and these become negative 0, positive 1, so that's the inverse. Okay. So H of Z is equal to C transpose, which is H1, H2 times this inverse. So I'm going to keep that 1 by Z squared outside, and then Z0, 1, Z times B, which is 1, 0 plus D, which is H0. Okay, so what exactly is this 2 by 2 matrix times this? So this whole thing here is going to be a 2 by 1, and that's Z times. So essentially, because this is 0, so we just retain the first column. That's what it does. So the second column doesn't matter because of that 0, and then so you take this row vector and multiply with the column vector, and so we get so that's equal to 1 by Z squared times H1 Z plus H2 plus H0, which can then be written as H0 plus H1 Z by Z squared is 1 by Z plus H2 by Z squared is e to the power minus 2. And that's exactly what we expect to see, which is H0 plus H1 Z to the power minus 1 plus H2 Z to the power minus 2. But now we are able to derive that using the state space representation. Okay. Any questions about how to compute the transfer function from state space representation, or even how to formulate the state space representation for a given block diagram? So, take if there are 100 flip flops or 100 delays, there are 100 states, and the input of the delays will be the next state vector, and then you write down the equations. So, okay, before I ran out of time last class, I think I was trying to write down the state space representation for a biquad, I think. Let's see where we stopped. So, so before I stopped, I was trying to find the state space representation of the biquad. So the biquad has this. So biquad is essentially a second order IIR filter organized in this form, and it has two delay elements. So we call that two states, and so. So I was trying to, and I didn't complete that, but let's just complete that example before I leave this topic. So if I take the biquad example, okay, these coefficients, we took them as A, B, C, D, E. By the way, again, just like the FIR, we can, by inspection, we can simply write down the transfer function. So the forward path, so the easiest way to see that, as I explained, biquad is there, bi means two, there are two sides to that, the all pole side and the all zero side. And if I first consider the transfer function of the all zero and don't bother about the pole side, then that's direct path C plus d z to power minus 1 plus e z to power minus 2. These are two delays. And then take the all pole side, which is 1 minus a times z to power minus 1 minus b times both delays z to power minus 2. But we want to compute that transfer function h using the state space representation. So if I call this state again, the first state x1, and I call this x2 at time n, and then the next state. So this will be the next state, which is the state x1 at time n plus 1, and if this is x2 n, this is the next state, which is x2 at time n plus 1. So so we can say x1, so let's call this one also u, which is fine. So x1 n plus 1, x2 n plus 1. So the next state is equal to the transition matrix A times the state vector at time n plus some column vector times input. Okay, so what is x1 n plus 1? That's A times x1, A times x1 plus B times x2 plus input u. Okay, that's x1. And what is x2 n plus 1? Any volunteer, what is x2 n plus 1? That same as x1 n. So that's simply 1, 0, 0. Okay. Okay, so now I can write the output equation, and this is where I had stopped last class. So the output equation y n. So what is the output here? Is a c times x1 n plus 1 plus a d times x1 n plus e times x2 n. Okay, that's output here. However, I don't want in this form, I want output expressed in terms of the current state vector and the input, current input. So I have to substitute that x1 n plus 1 from the state equation here. So if I substitute that, this will be C times A x1n plus B x2n plus input un plus D x1n plus E x2n, and that is equal to, if I now write that down as C transpose times the state vector plus some quantity times the input u. So if I collect the terms containing x1 together, that is A times C plus D, and if I collect these terms containing x2 together, and that is C times B plus E, and then if I collect the coefficient of the input u, that's simply C. Okay, so now we have described the state transition state space representation of the biquad. So this is our A matrix, 2 by 2 matrix A, and this is B, this is C transpose, and that's D. Okay, so so how do we compute h of z, the transfer function? So I need to compute the, let's first go ahead and compute the z times I minus a inverse, and that is going to be z minus a minus b minus 1, 0 minus 1, and simply z. Okay, that inverse is going to be 1 over the determinant, and what is the determinant? This times that, z squared minus az minus product of minus b and minus 1, which is plus b. So that's minus b times, and I am trying to tell you how to write inverse of 2 by 2 matrix very quickly. So take this one here. Okay, so where is yeah, so simply the diagonals are changed. So AD is a DA, this B and C stay the same with negative sign. So the diagonals are changed. So this is Z minus A, and these stay the same with negative sign, so they become B and 1. So that's the Zi minus A inverse. And then to that I have to multiply C transpose times this quantity times column vector B, which is 1, 1, 0, that's column vector B, plus D, which is that C. Okay, now think about this quantity here multiplied by the column vector 1, 0. Once again, whatever this quantity is doesn't really matter, because the second element is 0. So all that remains really is this quantity. So this quantity stays after we multiply with B, which is 1, 0. Because this element is 0, these are multiplied by 0. So that goes away. So now the transfer function can be written as C transpose, which is AC plus D, BC plus E times C transpose times this whole thing here. So I can keep this 1 by Z squared minus AG minus B, and then this only the column Z1, because I have already multiplied by the column vector B, plus D, which is a C. Okay, so if I simplify that, so this is AC plus D multiplied by Z plus BC plus E divided by Z squared minus AZ minus B plus C, which is equal to AC plus D times Z plus BC plus E plus CZ squared minus ACZ minus BC divided by Z squared minus AZ minus B, and minus ACZ cancels out with plus ACZ, minus BC cancels out with plus BC. Okay, so let's see what's left. So if I collect the highest term CZ squared, okay, next degree 1 term dz plus E divided by Z squared minus AZ minus B, and now divide the numerator and denominator by Z squared. So then this will be C plus dz to power minus 1 plus Ez to power minus 2 divided by 1 minus Az to power minus 1 minus Bz to power minus 2. And indeed, that's exactly same as what we would have expected to see by inspection, which is C plus D Z to power minus 1 plus Ez to power minus 2 by 1 minus Az to power minus 1. Okay. So it's a roundabout way, but we will see. If you are thinking I am wasting a lot of time talking about state space representation, that's really not true, because state space representation tells us a lot about the finite word length properties, especially when we implement these in fixed point programmable processors or in fixed point hardware. So a good understanding of scaling and a round of noise requires the understanding of state space representation. So okay, so this is probably the time I will stop with this topic and go to the next topic. Any questions before I talk about autocorrelation and power spectral density? Okay, so this is probably a good time. What I want to do throughout the semester is tell you how the topics that I am teaching relate to your homework. Ultimately, that's really what you have to do. So let's just go to the Canvas website, and at least I can show you whatever I have shown so far. How does that help you do the homework? So we can download the first homework. I've changed quite a bit from last class, because I had been thinking that I could get to chapter 8, which I still probably could, but that will be towards the late. So I removed a couple of problems. I'm not sure if this computer is downloading the correct one or not. I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. But yeah, so yeah, we should be deleting this chapter 8. So that's really for next homework. Okay, so this should go away. So for the first problem, we are describing this. You can see here this is a third order or 4-tap FIR filter. This is again a similar filter. Third order, there are 3 flip-flops, 3 states. So third degree 3 or 4 tap. So in a different form, some of the delays are on the top, some are on the bottom, but it's still an FIR. There is no feedback. And then the last one has a 5th order IIR filter. So you can quickly see that this looks like an IIR, but the number of states is 5, because there are 5 delay elements here, and then there are 2 feed forward taps here. Okay, so so the goal of this part is to find the transfer functions, and you do that by inspection or by any other means. You do that in the time domain without, or in the frequency domain without state space. So do not use state space representation for this part. We'll get to that in the next part. So problem 2, describe each filter in problem 1 by state space representation. So here, for example, think of the output here. Put these 3 delays into delay, call them states x1, x2, x3, x4 and x5, and then the inputs of those will be next states, and then write the state space representation. And I don't want you to do a 5 by 5 inverse. So using state space representation, derive the transfer functions of the 2 FIR filters. You will still need to do a 3 by 3 inverse, because there are 3 delay elements. So, these two are not trivial like 2 states. So, it is not 2 by 2 matrix inverse, but 3 by 3 matrix inverse, but it is not all that bad. It is not all that bad. Okay, so, the problem 3 is has given you this A, B, C, D matrix, the state space parameters, and then draw a signal flow graph. Maybe I will spend a little time now that I see that term, and many of you have seen this in your undergraduate classes. So, draw a signal flow graph or block diagram. So, what I was doing in the example right now, start with the block diagram of the biquad and then get this ABCD. Here given this ABCD, and as you can see here, this is a third order filter because there are 3 states. Okay. All right. So, so from the ABCD, draw the block diagram or the signal flow graph, it does not really matter, and then using this ABCD compute the transfer function. So, again you will need to do a 3 by 3 matrix inverse. So, I will get to problem 4, but I will get to that, but before I get to that, let me briefly spend a little time talking about this term here, signal flow graph, and how that relates to block diagrams, and then we'll get to the next topic after that. Okay. So, that should at least help you complete the problems 1 to 3. The last problem is a MATLAB problem, and we'll talk about that after I complete this topic. Okay. So, what is a signal flow graph? So, a signal flow graph is a different kind of representation than the block diagram. So, for example, here if I want to take that so called biquad and draw that as a signal flow graph. So, replace each delay by z to power minus 1. So, z to power minus 1. So, that is essentially describing that that is the z transform. So, if I start with that node here and then z to power minus 1 and z to power minus 1, okay, and then these multipliers a, that becomes just a path. Instead of showing this explicit multiply and the add nodes, so we have input u, and this is how we describe that multiplication. So, multiplication by a is simply a coefficient on that edge, and multiplication by b is shown here, and every node is a summing node. That means every node gets many inputs, and it just computes the sum of those inputs. Okay. So, so this node is same as that output of the summing node. So, I can put that here, that is okay. So, this is just, if I do not put any number, that means it is 1, and that is simply the output of that summing node. And to compute the output y, I simply multiply this by c, multiply this by d, multiply this by e, and put them into one summing node, and that is the output y. Okay. So, this is the signal flow graph representation of the biquad. So, it does not really matter to me if you from the given state space, if you draw this signal flow graph or the block diagram, it really does not matter. So, you can do whatever you want. I just want to write down for you the 3 by 3 matrix, not that you can find that from any website, which is fine, but if we have any arbitrary 3 by 3 matrix, and that is going to be 1 over the determinant, and the determinant is going to be A times EI minus HF minus B times, cross that out, DI minus FG plus C times DH minus EG. and then these are going to be the adjoint transpose, and I can simply write them without going through this. So this is EI minus FH, CH minus BI, BF minus CE, FG minus DI, AI minus CG. These are the adjoints. This will be part of your lecture notes, so it doesn't matter if you don't write down the whole thing. I will post the lecture notes right after the class. Okay, so so that's really how you will compute the 3 by 3 matrix inversions. Anyway, you can use the formula and just use some website to give you the numbers. That's fine. Okay, so what I want to talk about next topic is the so-called autocorrelation and power spectral density. How many of you have heard of these terms? Few of you, yeah. And if you have taken a class on random processes or our graduate probability class 5531, then I'm sure you've heard of it. If you have taken undergraduate 3025, undergraduate probability, we do teach this, but it's taught so lightly that you don't really capture this, which is perfectly fine, and you know that's perfectly fine. So autocorrelation and power spectral density are two things that are very important in signal analysis. A lot of what I have talked about so far, the simple FIR filters and IIR filters are great because these are called deterministic filters, and once we know what these coefficients are, I can compute the frequency domain response. In a lot of real practical signal processing, okay, a lot of what we learn in 45, 41 or an undergraduate DSPL, that's a lot of good knowledge, very good knowledge, but we have to think about when we do real world signal processing, there is a lot of noise. And when there is a lot of noise and there are signals that are varying in a random manner, then we really can't use the deterministic methods. So we can't use a deterministic filter. We have to use an adaptive filter that adapts with respect to the randomness properties of whatever is changing, whether it's a channel or whatever. So in some sense, the so-called linear time invariance, if the system is not linear time invariant, we can't describe that by a transfer function, and it's harder to analyze in closed form those systems. Okay, so in so-called random signal processing, the equivalence of linear time invariance takes us to what I won't spend a lot of time, but it takes us to what is known as wide sense stationarity. So if a random process is wide sense stationary, then the behavior in some sense mimics the linear time invariance property in the deterministic system. Okay, so I don't want to go into that a lot, but the autocorrelation is, so instead of using the signal itself, we can use the autocorrelation. Why is that? Because the signal, if we have the signal plus noise, then a lot of the properties that I should be computing directly from the signal won't be possible because the signal itself is a noisy signal. But I can compute a lot of the desired properties using the so-called autocorrelation property. And we'll talk about, and you will get a lot of practical insight to what autocorrelation can be used for in the last problem, in the MATLAB problem. So what exactly, so if we have a random signal xn, so I call that a random wide sense stationary signal. Okay, well, if you don't really know these things, it doesn't matter. I don't want to spend a lot of time. Just take it that system is wide sense stationary. It needs to satisfy certain properties to be wide sense stationary, and it's I'm not going to spend more time. Okay, so I can define the autocorrelation of the sequence Rx of lag k. So R is the autocorrelation of the signal x with lag k. So this k is called the lag k. Is the expected value, because it is a random signal, I have to take the expected value of xn times x conjugate n minus k. So if the signal is a complex signal, if it is a real signal, then don't bother about conjugate. But if it is a complex signal in general, like in communication systems, where the signal is complex because we are transmitting a modulated signal that may have an in phase and a quadrature phase component. But if you are doing biomedical signal processing, then all the signals are in almost all cases real. Okay, so that's so this lag k relates to that n minus k, and in fact the wide sense stationarity property states that it doesn't really matter. So that quantity, the autocorrelation quantity, if the system was not wide sense stationary, if the signal was not, then I would say this is Rx with as a function of n and k, which is the starting index n and k. But the wide sense stationarity property allows us to get rid of that n, because the behavior of the system, behavior of this expected value does not depend on whether the value of n here is 100 or 2000 or 10,000, it doesn't matter. Okay, so and there are a lot of properties. So basically it's saying if you take the signal xn, so if I have a signal, let's say a rectangular signal, let's just say rectangular signal, let's say okay, this is, I'm now taking a deterministic signal. So this is a deterministic signal, not a I am not adding noise to that. So let's say this is 0, this is 10. So this is a period, let's say this is a periodic signal with period 10. So periodic with period 10, and also I'm describing that as a continuous time, which is not what I'm not interested in. In this class, I'm not interested in any continuous time. But you could think of that as, well, that's probably not a good way to think, but okay, so I could take that as 0 to 10, and this is 100. So think of these as 10 non-zero samples, and then 90 zero samples, and then it repeats. Okay, so think about that. So period is 100. Now you can think of that as a discrete sequence. Now if I want to compute Rx of lag 3, okay, so you shift this right by 3 units, and if you do that, then this is 3 okay. So so if I take the expected value, so this should be, so I've shifted by 3, so this should be 3 to 13. Okay, but the product would be 0 after 10, because this is 0. So this would really be, so the average value would be 7 over 100. The expected value over one period, expected value over one period will be 7. So this 3 to 10 will be 7, and the period is 100. So the average value of one period will be 7 by 100. Okay, so that's kind of telling you one example. And Rx will be 0 for k equal to k greater than 10. Okay, for k between 10 and 100, so if I shift this by, is that right? If I shift this by 90, maybe up to 90, 10 to 90. If I shift this by 91, then we will get non-zero, right? Right. So if I shift this by 10, so this one comes right after 10 and then becomes 0. Okay. So for these many terms, 80 terms, it will be 0 for okay. So basically the idea of autocorrelation, it is describing the self similarity of the signal with itself as I compute the similarity between the signal and its shifted version. So that's what is the shifted version by k, and take the expected value. Okay, so and we'll see why that might have some applications in well, it has a lot of applications in real signal processing, but the one that I've given you is to compute the period of a signal, and we'll talk about that. Okay, all right. So Rx is conjugate symmetric. What does that mean? It means that Rx is conjugate symmetric. That means if I compute Rx of minus k, so this is going to be expected value of xn, x conjugate n plus k, replace k by minus k, and that can be written as expected value of xn plus k conjugate xn, which can then be written as expected value of xn plus k x conjugate n conjugate of the whole thing. Okay, you take the conjugate outside, and this quantity, again the difference between this time and that time is k, just like this is n minus n plus k. Take this time minus that time. So this is equal to Rx of k and then the conjugate of that. So that's why we say that the autocorrelation sequence is conjugate symmetric. When I say sequence, what does that mean? That means for various lags. So it is a function of k. And for real signals, that's just symmetric. There is no conjugate involved. So if I tell you the Rx of 0 is 1, and this one is 0.8, and this is lag k, this is minus 0.3, then, well, this is a real signal, so you can then say that it's symmetric. Conjugate symmetric is same as, even though I didn't tell you what minus 1 is, you know that's 0.8 because it's symmetric. I didn't give you minus 2, but that's minus 0.3. So, so there are many other properties that I won't really get into. We don't want to spend a lot of time on this in this class, but in general, Rx of k magnitude is going to be less than or equal to Rx of 0 magnitude for all k. So, so there will never be a case that this will be minus 0.9. This will keep decreasing in magnitude. Okay. All right. So, so now what exactly is the power spectral density? So if it is a random signal, then so if it is a deterministic signal, I can compute the discrete time Fourier transform x e to power j omega, and I can see what the frequency content is. But for a random signal, we can define the power spectral density as the expected value of the discrete time. Well, this is one definition, and there are many, but let's just take this simple definition. This is the expected value. Why am I saying expected value? Because that signal x is a random signal, and if I compute its discrete time Fourier transform, and then well, in some sense take the average over many ensembles of the random process, and that's the power spectral density. So if I compute the expected this discrete time Fourier transform of x e to power j omega magnitude squared, so that can be written as x e to power j omega times x conjugate e to power j omega. So the magnitude squared of a signal, a magnitude squared, is equal to a times its conjugate. So 3 plus j4 magnitude is equal to squared is equal to 5. 3 squared plus 4 squared, 25. Okay, so so this can be written as summed overall n xn e to power minus j omega n, and the other one I can use a different index m and xm e to power minus j omega m, and I have to take that conjugate. So I make this conjugate and change the minus j to plus j. So this is the same thing here, n replaced by m and then conjugated. And then if I collect the double sums together, n and m, then this is xn x conjugate m e to the power minus j omega n minus m, and if I substitute n minus m as L, and if I switch this, take this sum inside, okay, so the inner sum, okay, the outer sum is now, so this implies m is equal to n minus L. Okay, so now instead of summing the outer sum over m is described in terms of L, the inner sum is n xn x conjugate, m is n minus L, so substitute that here. So x well, let me actually use n minus m is k, so we'll use the notation k, so that will be the lag k. So n minus k e to the power minus j omega n minus m is k. Okay, so that's that quantity. Now if I take the expected value on both sides, expected value of the x e to power j omega magnitude squared, that's equal to a summed over k. Now the only random part is the signal itself, and if I take the expected value of this, what is the expected value of that quantity? That is simply going to be Rx of k. Okay, so that's the expected value. So expected value of this is the autocorrelation. So we have established something that is very significant, and we are saying that the power spectral density is the discrete time Fourier transform of autocorrelation sequence. Okay, so another way of saying that is the autocorrelation sequence is the inverse discrete time Fourier transform of the power spectral density. Okay, so that's kind of the relationship between power spectral density and the autocorrelation function. And so how can we use this to play with the signals that I've assigned in the homework? So before I get into the homework, which I do want to spend some time, so you can spend time on your homework. So let me take one wide sense stationary signal. So let the signal xn be some random amplitude a cosine n omega plus n omega naught, the fundamental frequency, plus a random signal theta. So this A is random. So we can say that let's just assume this is 0 mean and sigma squared variance, and this theta is uniform random variable between 0 to twice pi or minus pi to pi, it doesn't matter. So here is the thing, if the signal was what I want to do in this particular example is to find the frequency of the signal. If I have collected a certain signal from certain sensor and I want to find what is the frequency or the fundamental frequency or the dominant frequency of that signal, and if it was a deterministic signal, if it is a deterministic signal, I don't really need to do any kind of fancy signal processing. If I have a periodic, if this was some 3 cosine n omega naught, for example, and then I could just say, okay, if it is a periodic signal, then I can say, okay, well, we can look at corresponding points. I can take the distance between peak to peak, so that would be the period. But the signals that the sensor is computing has certain noise. In this case, this random noise, which is the random phase noise, is going to change that, and so instead of that peak being here, the peak might be here, or the peak might be here because of the noise, and because this is changing the phase of the signal. So cosine would be at its peak when the whole thing here is a multiple of twice pi, but because of this phase randomly changing, this could be somewhere else. So that is the reason we need to compute the autocorrelation. So how do I use, so what exactly is the autocorrelation of the sequence? So R of k, if I put x or not doesn't matter, it's only one signal x. So that's going to be this quantity itself, which is a times cosine n omega naught plus theta. So expected value R is equal to expected value of xn. I'm going to drop the conjugate because that's a real signal, xn minus k. So this xn minus k will be another a, that makes it a squared, times cosine n omega naught minus k omega naught plus the random noise theta, phase theta. So that's going to be equal to expected. So I can write down so you will remember from trigonometry that cosine a minus b plus cosine a plus b is 2 cosine a cosine b. Okay, so cosine a cosine b is equal to half cosine a minus b plus a half cosine a plus b. Okay, so if I use that, then this is going to be expected value of a squared times, so a squared by 2 times. Okay, I have that half, I can take that outside. Now cosine a minus b, if I do this minus that, then n omega naught minus n omega naught cancelled out, theta cancelled out, so we just have cosine k omega naught plus cosine A plus B. If I add these two, then this is going to be cosine 2n omega naught minus k omega naught plus 2 theta. Okay, so so that Rx k, if I take the expected value of any cosine is 0. Expected value of any sinusoid, if you take a sinusoid or a cosinusoid and integrate over the theta changing from 0 to 2 pi, that's going to be 0. Okay, so we're integrated over one period. Expected value of a squared, I've assumed that to be 0 mean, so that's simply sigma squared by 2 cosine k omega naught. So that is the autocorrelation sequence, and if I plot that, so cosine this cosine k omega naught, so the first 0 will happen when k omega naught is equal to pi by 2. Okay, the second is the first 0. The second 0 will happen at cosine k omega naught is 0 when k omega naught is 3 pi by 2. So the lag k here is going to be pi by 2 omega naught, and the second 0 is going to be 3 pi by 2 omega naught. And if I take the difference between these two 0 crossings, okay, then that difference delta is going to be 3 pi minus pi, which is 2 pi by 2 omega naught, which is going to be pi by omega naught. Okay. So if I take that omega naught as twice pi over the period t, if it was periodic with period t, then this would be, let me see, make sure something doesn't look right. Okay, we'll get back to that. Something doesn't look right, but this is going to be equal to 2 pi by t, t goes to the top, pi gets cancelled out. This is t by 2. Okay, so okay, we'll get back to that. Okay, so so this says that if I compute the autocorrelation and then take the distance between 0 crossings, I can then compute the time period t, and then I can compute the frequency. So how can you compute the frequency of the signal? So the frequency of the signal omega naught is going to be pi by delta. Okay, so so that's kind of what we want to do. So let me spend a little time explaining the goal of what we are trying to do, and then spend a little time on the homework. So that way it's somewhat intense, so it's not trivial. There are two data samples that are posted. One is the PPG signal, and that will be used to compute the heart rate. So the PPG sensor is measuring the PPG signal that can be used to compute the heart rate. So I want you to compute the heart rate by computing the autocorrelation sequence, and then by looking at the 0 crossings, and then relate that to the frequency just as I showed in the lecture notes. The second signal is a respiration signal that can be used to compute the breathing rate or the respiration rate. And both of these signals that have been given to you is the sampling frequency is 100 hertz. Okay, the sampling frequency is 100 hertz. That means the sample period is 10 milliseconds. Okay. Okay, so I first of all, let me just say that Nanda spent a lot of time is sitting in the back creating this exercise, and certainly I want to make sure we give him due credit for helping with creating the problem as well as giving the signals for use in the class. So I'm going to go through one example. So that's kind of a template for you to tell you what you need to do. So this example is taking the PPG signal, but instead of taking at 100 hertz sample period, this is taking at 20 hertz. So same thing, it's a different signal. So you want to mimic what I am going to go through now. Your homework will mimic these steps. Okay. So so this is the PPG signal, photoplethysmogram, and this is the signal here. This is the raw signal collected from the sensor. This is collected for 12 plus seconds. Yeah, maybe 12.5 seconds or something like that. Okay, so 256 samples probably, 256 by 20, whatever that number is. Okay, so so we have 256 samples here at 20 samples per second. The next slide is showing just compute the DFT. Okay, now let me just take a brief pause. All the lecture notes that I have talked about so far, I have been using DTFT, or the discrete time Fourier transform, for the spectrum of the signal. Now this is not showing DTFT, but it's DFT. Okay. How does the DFT relate to the discrete time Fourier transform? So if you let the program run DFT, it's computing something. That's not computing discrete time Fourier transform, but close. It's a scaled version of that. It's a scaled version of the discrete time Fourier transform. If you do it right, And what do I mean by if you do it right? Okay, so when we typically talk about discrete time Fourier transform, so we plot usually something like let's say well, let's say just a low pass filter. This is minus pi, this is let's say minus pi by 6, and plus pi. This is one period. Okay, DFT has no notion of this negative side. I mean, the DFT is computing n samples. So when you compute DFT, we are going to be computing, basically think of this first as 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so you extend that, this is twice pi, and there will be another part here. Okay, so think about what the DFT is computing is the one-sided version of that, not the two-sided version. So that's what the DFT is computing. Okay, and then think about, so the notion of pi, so what is pi? So twice pi is equivalent to what? 2 pi is equivalent to what? The sample frequency. So if I sampled at 1 kilohertz, so that 2 pi would be 1 kilohertz and pi would be 500 hertz. Now in the DFT, we don't really bother about the sample frequency. In fact, there is no notion of sample frequency at all. So that twice pi has to map to n. So now think about, so there is a scale factor that I don't want to get into that twice pi over n, but I don't want to get into that. So if you compute the n point DFT, so 0 to n minus 1, that's what you will compute. You will compute something like this with a scale factor, but that will be what you compute will be the one-sided discrete time Fourier transform subject to some scaling. Okay, is that making sense? Think about these things. If you didn't think about these in the 45-41 class, there is more to think about. Okay, so let's get back to the slide now. So this is, so if you look at, so this is computing the DFT. This is simply computing the DFT, which is showing. So this is the DFT number here is normalized to hertz. So this would be the point n by 2. This would be the point n by 2 or pi. So think about this 10 hertz. Sample frequency of 20 hertz is twice pi, 10 hertz is pi, twice pi corresponds to n point, this is n by 2 point, n by 2 points up to here. If we look at the where the dominant frequency is, and that's 1.25 hertz, 1.25 cycles per second, and if you want to compute that per minute, multiply by 60, 60 times 1.25 is 75 beats per minute. Okay, so that's kind of how we get. So just take the DFT and you get the heart rate by looking at the peak frequency. Okay, now if we compute the autocorrelation sequence as a function of lag, so this is a function of lag, and then if you take the zero crossings, so in this case the zero crossings here are 16 samples, the lag is 16, so that lag 16 at 20 hertz sampling rate is 0.8 seconds, or if you take the reciprocal of that, that's 1.25 hertz, which is equivalent to 75 bits per minute, which is same thing that we can get from the DFT. So, so we are trying to get the same information from DFT and the autocorrelation sequence, and finally we want to compute the autocorrelation sequence here in a roundabout way. Instead of computing directly by the MATLAB command xcore, here we compute the DFT xk multiply by conjugate, get the xk magnitude squared, that's the equivalent of the power spectral density. So this is the magnitude squared, and then take the inverse DFT of the previous slide, then we get back the autocorrelation sequence, and then you can take the zero crossings. So let me then go back to the homework and see what the homework is. Long homework, long and involved. I certainly want you to start the homework sooner rather than later. Let's see if I had already downloaded the homework. Yeah. Okay. So so this long homework, we give you two signals, the PPG and the respiration rate signal sampled at 100 hertz. Okay. So grab them from the canvas site. So the first part, plot these raw signals, take the FFT, and from the FFT, so in part A, take the FFT and plot those things, and then take the highest peak of the FFT and find that corresponding frequency and report those frequencies of the PPG and the respiration rate. So that's kind of part B. And so we have done that already using FFT in the parts. In the third part, here using autocorrelation, find the single-sided autocorrelation. Single-sided meaning don't bother about negative k. Okay, so plot that, and you can use this xcore command. Use MATLAB help xcore, and in part B, take the following as zero crossings, and from that compute the frequencies, and compare that with what we got in previous part from the DFT, and in part C. This is a roundabout way of doing it. So take the DFT, multiply by conjugate, get the magnitude squared, take the inverse FFT, and then compute the R, and then see if that R looks similar to the R you got in part A. So that will simply verify the relationship between the power spectral density and the autocorrelation sequence. Okay. Finally, when you take the inverse FFT, again, because we are only bothered about the one-sided FFT, choose the number of points with twice the length of the signal. So when you compute the autocorrelation should have twice the length before you do the IFFT. Otherwise, you will get something wrong. Very interesting to play with. I think you will get some practical insights about what these signals are and why we are interested in processing them. So we have a few seconds left if there are any questions. Okay, you should be able to do your homework. The homework is not due next class, but it's due next week at the end of this class. So exactly this time next class. So start working on problem set 1. We will begin with chapter 8 next class.
Öyle bile olsa ezberinden zorlasın zaten ben yapacağım.
Ya evet, o zaman işte ben ne yapacağım?